Without further introductions, let's begin. So we're going to take one round of questions, comments from the audience, one round of responses from all those who would like to give a brief response here, and then we'll have the conclusion for the day. So we'll start in this row here. If you could please introduce yourselves also so that everyone knows who you are, and let's try to keep the questions and comments brief, and then it will be easier for us to allow more voices to be heard. Please.
Thank you. A very short question by me. I'm Dragan Domazet from Belgrade. There is a general feeling in Europe that Europe is lacking politicians with vision, with long-term strategy. More or less, we are facing more and more politicians that are very election-oriented, market-oriented, polls-oriented, and probably this is one of the reasons why Europe now has problems. So I don't ask any particular panelist, but those who want to provide us a solution or an answer, I will ask for the answer. Why is it like that? How we can increase the quality of politicians?
Okay. Let's continue. Let's take one round, maybe 4 or 5 questions or comments, and then we can come.
Good evening, Your Excellencies. My question is, as we know that democracies do not fight each other, and the problems that Europe has now is because of its neighboring countries having problems, and that's as a result of dictatorship and also poverty. Is there any plan that the European countries can think about of helping these countries, first of all, to democratize so that you will have peace and their people will have peace as well, and you will have no more refugees, and also to help invest in these countries, to help these poor people. I know it is not easy, but with these poor countries, any small amount of money will help poor people get better living standard. So do you have any plans? Have you thought about any plan to help neighboring countries like the Middle East to democratize and invest in these countries to help stabilize the region? Thank you very much.
Okay. Please show your hands for
we are in the midst of the greatest humanitarian crisis of our lifetime. At the moment, all the nations do not want any refugees. And at the same time, the institutions are spending billions of dollars in addressing the humanitarian crisis, as well as human resources are being used. So we are treating the symptoms by looking after the refugees. Why don't we stop that expense by stopping the generation of refugees, by preventing and stopping conflicts? So, Your Excellencies, I put it to you for your consideration that you need to help whatever institution or leaders who are attempting to prevent or stop conflicts. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. As you can tell from the accent, from the UK. I want to ask about the current situation with Europe. Is the answer more Europe, less Europe, or somewhere middle of the road where Europe deals with the current problems such as unemployment, the refugee crisis, whether it's defense policy? You may find it easy to get defense policy now that the UK is leaving. So that's my question.
Let's continue, especially voices that weren't heard earlier today. Comments or questions? Here, to your right. Okay. You have to help us with the gender balance in particular from the panel, please.
Hello, I'm from California. I have a question for all of you. What is the relationship between national, EU, decision-making and accountability in Europe's economic and monetary union? Just because I'm a little bit confused about that. So I hope someone can touch those points.
Any additional comments or questions before we give it to the podium? Oh, yeah, please.
Just very small one. Question to all of you probably, but I'm expecting just one word or one expression, especially those who are, I'm sorry, former presidents or prime ministers. So what do you suggest, what would you recommend and advise us? What not to do? Probably it could come from your previous experience, what not to do in order not to be mistaken. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Excellencies. I'm based in Chad, and we have the Boko Haram insurgency going on between Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, and Niger. EU has promised, or I think has given African Union 50 million euros in assisting the internally displaced people and others. I know from what I have seen, being in that system or trying to help the internally displaced and refugees, whatever comes trickles down. I am saying and asking Your Excellencies to please, our leaders stay 25 years, 30 years in government, and it goes round and round. Our children, our grandchildren, don't have a future when there's no transparency and when there's no justice. Because these people who form, the so-called terrorists, where they get their little arms from, you all know. Someone is sponsoring them. But please and please look and talk to our leaders like you talk to yourselves in the European Union. To please look and see how they don't have to. You don't have to. Whatever you can do within 8 years as a president, you can't do in 30 years. Please. Thank you.
Okay, so I think now we should... one final question here, please.
It's a short one. Thank you, Mark. Excellencies, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. My question is, who is your neighbor? I've been listening to all of you speaking as Europeans and mostly concerned about what's happening in your backyard or your own countries, and mostly Eastern Europe. There's a world beyond Europe and Eastern Europe. Does it matter to you? And if so, what are your thoughts? And I think the young lady from Chad is beginning to deal with that. I just want to hear what are your thoughts on the broader world? And because it said, as long as there is injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace anywhere.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I would suggest we go to the panel. Now, if you are good mathematicians and we imagine that everybody speaks 5 minutes, this will be another hour and a half. So the challenge that I have, even though I know it's unfair, is to try to see if we can just have one brief round of essentially spontaneous comments, responses, reflections. Of course, not to all of the questions, but I think if each of you could offer maybe one reflection or piece of insight on maybe one of the aspects that was just raised, would be an excellent way for us to bring some additional perspectives to the day. And again, I don't want to give you a time limit, but let's say, ideally 1 or 2 minutes, if we could keep it to that minimum, really one thought, one contribution that you think might be helpful, especially to the participants, the questions. I think that would be excellent. And then we can conclude thereafter with, I think, a photo with the speakers and some of the others, and then we can move to the dinner. So I don't want to keep things too long. Last night we went, I think, until 9:30. So I know it's a little bit unfair to give the microphone and at the same time say keep it very, very brief. But I think that would be very interesting and also dynamic. Let's say 1 to 2 minutes, a comment, a reflection, a contribution to maybe 1 or 2 of the aspects that were raised. And maybe, Mr. Zatlers, we could start with you and then just go from your side to the other. Would be excellent. Please.
Fine. I try to be short about what we should not do. You see, some days ago, the Russia's president Putin said the Russia's borders has no limits. I don't know what he was meaning by that, but we have to say ourselves, European borders have no limits. And therefore, we very often just think and talk about fatigue. They say we'll postpone for 5 years any enlargement. This is stupid, because we all know that all the Balkan countries must become one day the members of EU. We all understand that we should really eliminate this border line, or let's say the buffer line of like Ukraine and President Yushchenko mentioned, because what is a sphere of influence? It's uncertain in some area to fight for. If you have a direct border, Europe, Russia, let's say Europe, there will be much more cooperation and much less fight with losing of resources for influence. And if we are afraid or we hesitate, we get immediately problems. And the best example for that is stopping the accession talks with Turkey 10 years ago, which were started. Because when I talk to some people, who have these European aspirations, they said, no, if it goes like slowly as Turkey had, it will not happen in my lifetime. So therefore, why should I do something for this direction? So, summary, we have to understand that there are no limits for the European borders. And Balkan region is must to be in Europe, as we had the experience with Baltic region. And we also have to say about the neighboring countries like Ukraine. Very strict, forward, and without hesitation. Nobody understands us. Then if we hesitate and someday do something for our neighbors, something not, then we all take as in this room, the Europe is a nanny which can help their children. Europe is not a nanny. European Union is an organization. So it means you must be accepted.
I talked a lot, so I'll not spend too much time, but I would like to profit again to take the chance to say just one sentence. To me, all the questions focus as an answer to those values: freedom, democracy, and prosperity. If we preserve and firmly committed, not just to stay in the same situation, but to enrich the dimension of freedom, civilization, and prosperity and democracy, we will get a solution for any question.
I will also be very brief to answer the question related to the future of Europe. After Brexit, there was discussion, and actually discussion is still ongoing. What will be the answer, whether more Europe or less Europe or something which will be mixed Europe? So I would like to say that if we are looking globally at the general situation in the world, and especially the rise of Far East countries, I can only give the appeal to the member states of European Union not to take into consideration less Europe option, because with less Europe option, I think the Europe will get less and less important in the world to come.
I will try to two questions. Europe has no vision and Boko Haram. Europe has no vision. Vision means that I know what I wish and I have the possibility, either I have possibilities to reach it, or at least I move in the direction that I could. Europe, just mentioned two sub problems. Europe would wish that not mass influx of migration would come to Europe, but has no means to realize this vision, cannot realize it, and strictly speaking, does not know exactly how to reach it, because the influx of migrants does not depend on the countries of where they go, but from the conditions of countries from where they are going. And Europe is not able to influence it, and does not know, I would say, does not know how to influence it, how to reach it, etc. And the migrants problem is not enough just to say that yes, in last year came 1 million of migrants this year, 500,000, but not speaking how many of them would come next year and over next year, etc. If we do not say the development of this tendency, everything what we say to migrants problem has only a half of value. Second sub problem of Europe, centralization. There is quite a lot of strong movement in various European countries. France, I don't know how much strong is in Germany, but yes, there are movements that would not agree with a more centralization of European Union. But some problems are not to solve without a certain centralization, especially the euro problem, financial problem. And again, European Union does not know how to solve it. Boko Haram, European Union is not able and does not wish to send own soldiers to fight, especially in African conditions. You must mobilize your societies to wish to fight against Boko Haram. And financial problem, I think that European Union would be willing and would be able to provide money for weapons, for training of soldiers, etc. But soldiers and the will to fight you must mobilize yourself.
Well, from far away, Europe looks like a beacon of peace, stability, democracy, and well-being. Well, to a high extent it is, but it has enormous internal problems of different dimensions. The best thing Europe can do for the rest of the world is to put its own house in order and sort of be a good example of how the peoples, the countries of very complicated histories can make peace, can compromise, can build up working democracy, tolerate minorities. If we do it, then it will radiate to our neighborhoods. I don't believe that we have or we can export ready-made solutions. I mean, I spend in my CV, if you try hard, you will find 9 months in Baghdad after toppling of Saddam. When I was a eyewitness to a disastrous effort of what the Americans would call nation building. And it was naive, it was sometimes, well, it proved to be a disaster. We should not try to export ready-made solutions. However, what we do in Europe may be a very attractive example. And just listening to Viktor Yushchenko or the president of Albania, I also happen to know Albania from the years 97-2001, and I can see the difference. So Europe itself can be contagious. This is the biggest, positively contagious. This is the biggest significance of Europe in the world, not the money. Thank you. You are part of us.
I'm going to The recent global crisis reveals, besides the economical and social difficulties, even a more profound fact: the fracture between the present globalized political and economical system and the cultural models that defined its very beginnings. Why 21st century needs a new cultural model able to face not only the globalized world, economical and social shocks, but also able to create a hopeful vision towards the future, characterized by chaotic developments and incertitude. There is now a historical chance to come up with such a project. Why we need cultural diplomacy. Concerning the future of European Union, the European Union is a political project with its own individual identity. A project that began from the conflict generating by diversity during the time of the national state, but now not only that diversity is accepted, but it also promoted the development of national, linguistic, religious, and cultural identities. No model. I reject idea of model, American model or European model. No model can anymore pretend to be a unique solution. As a European intellectual, I am far from thinking that the European Union would be such a unique model. But I can only consider it as a source of inspiration. A critical review on European project is all the time necessary. For instance, we proudly talk about a common European identity based on shared values. Which are these values defining European identity? How could be tripartite without forgetting them, the specific characteristic and even the national limits on the way towards a common identity? Because this is a problem. Now, Europe have a common identity, or is to build a common identity. The answer of these questions lies right inside of European project, but also in European anxieties. If we will continue to shape project without taking into account the inevitable anxieties involved by a political structure of 500 million inhabitants, then we have few chances left to develop a strong and democratic Europe. That is why I believe that a long way towards a European solidarity should start within every nation, local community, and even family. Here, where we can often notice a lot of the typical contradiction to the north or south or east or west world discrepancies. But this could also be the place where we can find the identity binder of a common ethos. Thus we can better understand the world we live in, why we need the cultural diplomacy.
Okay. Well, next 25th of March, the European Union is going to celebrate its 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. And I think it will be a great date to remember the words of Jean Monnet, who was one of our fathers of the European Union, who says 60 years ago that the future of people in Europe is only united. And well, nowadays the European Union represents more or less 7% of the total population in our world. China represents more or less 18%, and India, only India, 17% also. So what I mean by that? I mean that in order to maintain and increase our political and economic influence, we need to do our homework. We all know the diagnosis. We all know the answers. What we need is political will. Like in life, also in politics, what you need is to face the challenges and to show political will. And also the globalization, the intensity of globalization, the intensity of the digital revolution, the intensity of the perception of the people, especially the young people, with regard to democracies, I think that also teach us that we need to move on faster. What I mean by that? I mean that after the crisis that began in the year 2008, as you know for sure, we have a common political monetary policy, but we don't have an economic and fiscal economic policy, common for all the Europeans. We have Schengen, or we used to have Schengen before the refugee crisis, but we don't have a common defense and security policy. We have a common market, but we don't have a common energy policy. We presume that we have a social market economy within the European Union, but we allow tax havens within the European Union. So there's a lack. Yes, there's a lack of political coherence. And this is something that we have to solve in order to make real what Jean Monnet says 60 years ago. We need a federation of Europe. Perhaps it's not gonna happen in the near future, but for sure, if we have to have a vision of what is gonna happen with Europe during the next decades, I truly believe that the only future that Europeans has is united and within a federation, a real federation for the European Union.
Look, resources are limited. I mean natural resources. But the other resource on the economy, labor force, is increasing up. And the question of redistribution is becoming more and more important. Now, we have national states. On top of that, we have unions. I'm sorry, I respect the European Union, but generally there are 19 unions in the world. A Eurasian Union, created a couple of years ago, also is a union which wanted to be in the center of the Eurasian continent and to earn money, passing goods and services from west to east, from east to west. That was fixed in the statute of this organization. And the question mark here is, it is the right way to continue? Yes, I do believe there is some inertia. European Union is going to be a little bit efficient, especially for new joint country or from Southern Europe. But step by step, it will lose its importance. There will become a time when we will start to create a union of unions. Today we have union of countries. This time will come. In terms of globalization, in terms of equilibrium, and equilibrium means that where we have a capital and mineral resources, we have a labor force also. And that will stop enemy. I do believe that. And for a short run, for a medium run, medium perspective, I do believe that European Union will continue its life. But step by step, in 30, 40, 50 years, that should be, they will be it should be stopped. They will become barriers in terms in front of world's development. Just a sample. A year ago, everybody, 102 countries signed the Paris Agreement. You know about that. Paris Agreement. The aim of the agreement is to decrease the ratio of growth. You know, this greenhouse gases, just to decrease the ratio. It's going to be hard and hard for humanity. And I am a co-president of the commission in Euronest, which is considering economic relationships between 6 countries of Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Belarus, Armenia, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and European Union. And what happened then? For example, Germany is doing well on the renewables. cutting this residues, waste. But the planet is one. It's turning around its axis, and there is no effect on that. The task is global. The task of climate change is a global, and we are going to have a new task as such. And I do believe we will transfer ourselves to creating a union of unions, and at the end, the only solution of all these problems in the economy, also Boko Haram, is to create international, really capable governance of the problems. Look to the monetary union, what it means. There is a negative interest here by the European Central Bank. What it means? Nobody can understand what will be the end, what they are doing. Or could work and the problem is that there is a fight between euro, dollar, and yuan is going to join to this fight, etc., etc. And I don't see any clear perspectives here. And the only solution is to have, we have UN now, but it's not enough. Step by step, we have to think about the world. World is unique with its problems, its resources, its money, its financial opportunities, etc. This is what I think, and this is what is going to happen in 30, 40, 50 years. Otherwise, you won't be manage a population in the planet by 15 billion people. You won't be able to manage that. Thank you.
I'm going to answer the question, what to suggest to the politicians, what not to do. I have a slogan, make love, not war. Not war, not conflict. Negotiate. Make a dialogue. Avoid making war, misunderstanding. The most important part of the culture of society are beside human rights, which are important. They are on the agenda. But the second and the most important question is the war, killing of the people. Aleppo today, we cannot count how many people have been killed, are dying today. The global peace does not exist for the global as a whole. Pope Francis predicted the World War III is around to come, his warning. Huntington, knowledgeable person, wrote the book, as you well know, Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilization. It is already there. Even not the whole civilization, within the same one, within Islamic, by Shia and Shiites sections, they are Sunni, they are fighting. And how? Decapitation, cutting the head from your neck. I have seen the picture. I cannot sleep well after that. It is terrorism. It is violence. It is conflict. It is war in one way or another. In my country, I have organized, and we are working hard on this, National Ethical Tribunal for those who are committing treason on the top of the politics, who are disregarding national interests, general values. They might be condemned ethically. What I'm now trying to suggest is to have interfaith discussions, dialogue. It has existed already. Some believers, some top persons from the churches and denominations are already doing it. I believe that it is perfect that we are dealing with the human rights and genocide. But let's see the world without wars and conflicts. And there are the most of the victims. I would like to suggest to Mark, to create kind of commission or separate department for peace. Peace should be discussed, should be on the top of our problems we are dealing with, because there is no other worse phenomenon than it is war. So, dear colleague, for your questions, let's try to work and suggesting to all these fine gentlemen, let's get rid of violence, conflicts, and wars. My dear new friend, this distinguished president, this victim of politics and policies he himself and his nation have been victimized. He has been counting, numbering, repeating several times how many conflicts, he was calling it conflicts, in different countries, in Georgia and Crimea and Don bases and so on. So there are so many all around the world. Near East is in such a trouble. I'm ashamed of the civilization where it is taking place. I'm in it, but I'm sorry for those who has been victimized. Not only refugees, but those who have been killed, all those who are not anymore in the house, all those who are not having anymore their house that has been burned down and so on. My strong suggestion, and we are going to work on it, Professor and Prime Minister Janez Jansa, good friend of mine, we are neighboring countries. We shall work together on creating national bodies to ethically value behavior of some people. Media it's necessary. It's absolutely important human rights to be informed, to have free media. But media are creating atmosphere for conflict, pouring oil for better fire in the house or in the city or in the plane or what have you. So thank you for the question. I shall try to follow it. Thank you.
Я також хотів подякувати за запитання. Щоб не повторювати своїх колег, я хотів зупинитися на безпековій темі. Буду говорити тезово. Якщо ми не даємо відповіді на безпекові виклики в Європі, ми не даємо відповіді ні на що. Ні економіка, ні фінанси, ні інші зносини не можуть закрити своєю сутністю проблеми безпекових відносин в Європі. Один великий німецький канцлер 50 років назад говорив: Європі потрібна або одна безпекова політика, або жодної. Ми повинні уникнути протистоянь в безпековій моделі. На жаль, у Європі сьогодні безліч безпекових моделей. А значить, ми не сформували єдину змістовну безпекову політику для всіх. Об'єднана Європа – це проект глобальний. А це означає, що зона відповідальності Об'єднаної Європи знаходиться там, де Об'єднана Європа має відносини.
It does mean that the responsibility is there where Europe has some relations.
Другими словами,
In other words,
Європа має відносини з усіма своїми партнерами і несе відповідальність за ці відносини.
Europe has relations with a lot of partners, and bear the responsibilities for these relations.
Звідси висновок. Проблеми краще вирішувати там, де вони виникають.
It's better to solve the issues where they are arising.
Якщо цього ми не робимо, проблеми приходять до Європи.
If we're not doing that, the problems are coming to Europe.
Я тут хотів, наприклад, поставити в приклад ситуацію в Сирії.
I want also to use the example of a situation in Syria.
Далі. Власне кажучи, соромно в третьому тисячолітті констатувати, що в Європі є війни і заморожені конфлікти.
Actually, a bit ashamed to say that there is still frozen conflicts and wars in Europe nowadays.
Соромно від того, що в об'єднаної Європи не вистачає або інструментарію, або волі ці питання поставити в порядок дня.
We are ashamed to say that there is no instruments or political will to put that on the agenda of the day.
Гадаю, що Європа повинна бути більш відданою до формування європейського простору.
Saying that Europe should be more devoted to the forming of the European space, area.
Насправді в Європі багато друзів,
And actually Europe has a lot of friends,
багато партнерів.
a lot of partners.
Але до цих партнерів не завжди Європа виступає віддано і послідовно.
But Europe is not always devoted to all of these partners and not always coherent towards these partners.
І останнє.
And lastly,
Мені здається, що Європа буде більш сильніша, коли вона буде мати більший імунітет від маніпуляцій.
and I think that Europe will be more stronger if we would have stronger immunity versus manipulations.
Безумовно, Європа повинна стати одноголосною.
Undoubtedly, the Europe should be anonymous,
Або принаймні мати більш узгоджену європейську політику.
or at least have a bit more coherent European policy.
Єдина Європа – це єдина умова її сили.
United Europe is the only precondition of its existence and power.
Це те, що я хотів би бачити в Європі.
That's what I would like to see in Europe.
Дякую.
It's sometimes it's very easy to be the last, so everything has already been answered. So I will just try to add something briefly on two most easier questions about the vision for Europe, and on the question, do we need in this situation more or less Europe? I think that the vision for Europe is still the same as it was 60 years ago. So, to create a place of stability, prosperity, peace, still the same vision. The problem is that the circumstances are different. 60 years ago, when this vision was starting to materialize, there were voters in European countries, in the founding countries of the European Union, which were totally aware of the disasters of the First and the Second World War, and they were aware what does it mean to create a space of peace and stability and prosperity. This was also the time of the beginning of the Cold War. So there was clear and present danger, and it was not so difficult to persuade the voters to support such vision. In current situation, this is much more difficult. The vision is still the same, but the political price for this vision to be paid is not the same. And it's different in different countries inside of the European Union. The majority of the voters voting now in the European Union member countries, they don't have the personal experience of the alternative, which could be much worse than the European Union now is. So much more efforts need to be invested to persuade people to believe in this vision. Do we need more or less Europe? Well, with Great Britain leaving the European Union, we will, at least for a short time, we will get less Europe. Much smaller Europe. But speaking from the institutional point of view, I think that current Lisbon Treaty, which we got after long negotiations, after failure with the European Constitution and so on, is for current situation more or less ideal framework. So we don't need new treaty. We don't need new experiments. It's good legal framework, but this is of course not enough. The question about the future, or the main dilemma is, do we Europeans, European institutions, the member states, national governments, especially from the biggest European countries, we are capable to proceed with the realization of this vision? President Zatlers pointed rightly, and I strongly support this approach. We don't need to stop enlargement. We need to accelerate the process to show that European Union is still the positive alternative, to not to create new problems in the Balkans, in the eastern neighborhood, which will arise if there is no this alternative, if there is no this goal for those countries. And surely there is one country we spoke about, Mr. President Yushchenko spoke about, is Ukraine, where this approach will find how to say the truth. If we let down the Ukraine, the country which suffered a lot during last century, after Holodomor, after everything what's happening now, I think that this is the start of the end of the European vision. So Europe in this situation needs first to, as somebody said before, clear its own house to prove that it's still working. And of course it needs to influence the neighborhood, because the challenges, the most important challenges are coming from the neighborhood. In this case, for this case, we need to reorganize increase and reorganize the development aid, especially for African countries. We need to develop ownership for this development aid to make it more effective. And of course, we need to create real force. We need to create European army to intervene in the situations where the soft power is not enough. And we all know that there are such situations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I would like to ask everyone to please express our sincere gratitude for all of the panelists for an excellent panel.